In 1990, the average Chinese citizen earned less than $1 a day. By 2020, China had more billionaires than any country except the United States. That's not a typo. One generation, one country, the fastest accumulation of wealth in human history. But here's what they don't tell you in the headlines. This wasn't capitalism. It wasn't communism either. It was something else entirely, something that bent the rules of economics so hard they nearly broke. This is the story of how China built wealth at a speed the world had never seen, and why that speed might be the very thing that brings it all down. Let's start with a number. Between 1980 and 2020, China's economy grew by an average of 9% every year for 40 years straight. To put that in perspective, if you grow at 9% annually, you double every 8 years. That means China's economy doubled 5 times in 4 decades. The United States, in that same period, doubled once. This wasn't gradual progress, this was exponential violence. And the question everyone keeps asking is how? How do you take a country where 88% of the population lived in extreme poverty and turn it into the world's second largest economy in less than half a century? The answer isn't what you think. In 1978, a man named Deng Xiaoping took control of China. The country was still reeling from Mao's Cultural Revolution. Farms were collectivized. Industry was centralized. The economy was in ruins. Deng did something radical. He opened the door just a crack. He let farmers sell their own crops. He created special economic zones where foreign companies could build factories. He allowed private businesses to exist alongside state-owned ones. But here's the key detail. The Communist Party never gave up control. This wasn't about freedom, it was about results. And the results were immediate. Chinese farmers who could suddenly keep their profits worked harder. Foreign companies who wanted access to 1 billion consumers built factories. Wages went up. Cities expanded. Money started moving. But this was just the surface. Underneath, China was building something much bigger. While the West celebrated China's embrace of markets, they missed the architecture. China didn't privatize its banks. It controlled them. And those banks didn't lend money the way Western banks did. They lent according to the plan. Need to build a high-speed rail network connecting every major city? The banks fund it. Want to construct entire cities from scratch? The banks fund it. Planning to subsidize strategic industries like solar panels or electric vehicles? The banks fund it. There was no debate about return on investment, no shareholders demanding quarterly profits. Just the state deciding where capital should flow and the banks making it happen. This gave China a superpower that no free market economy could match, the ability to build infrastructure and industrial capacity at a scale and speed that defied economic gravity. Between 2011 and 2013, China used more cement than the United States used in the entire 20th century. Let that sink in. 3 years versus 100 years. But infrastructure alone doesn't create wealth. You need demand. You need people buying things. So China engineered that too. They turned real estate into the wealth-building machine for ordinary Chinese citizens. In the West, people invest in stocks. In China, people invest in apartments. The government made it easy. They kept interest rates low. They restricted alternative investments. They made it culturally essential to own property before marriage. Suddenly, every Chinese family was incentivized to buy real estate. And the supply? Developers built like the world was ending. Cities sprouted apartment towers faster than they could fill them. Local governments, whose budgets depended on land sales, sold more and more land to developers. Developers borrowed more and more from banks to buy that land. It became a loop. Rising prices justified more construction. More construction justified rising prices. Between 2000 and 2020, Chinese household wealth grew by over 400%. Most of that wealth was tied up in real estate. Apartments that families bought became their retirement fund, their children's inheritance, their proof of success. 70% of Chinese household wealth is in real estate. In the United States, it's 35%. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. In 2021, one of China's largest developers, Evergrande, defaulted on its debt. It owed over $300 billion. Then another developer, Country Garden, followed. Then another. Suddenly, the machine that built China's wealth started sputtering. Because the entire system was built on one assumption that real estate prices would keep rising forever. Local governments needed land sales to fund themselves. Banks needed developers to keep borrowing. Families needed their apartments to appreciate in value. But prices didn't keep rising. They started falling. And when real estate prices fall in an economy where 70% of household wealth is Locked in property, people stop spending. When people stop spending, businesses struggle. When businesses struggle, unemployment rises. When unemployment rises, people default on mortgages. The loop reversed. Here's the irony. China's greatest strength became its greatest weakness. The ability to mobilize capital without worrying about profit meant China could build faster than anyone. But it also meant they built things nobody needed. There are entire cities in China with apartments for millions of people, highways that go nowhere, high-speed rail lines that run nearly empty. The infrastructure is spectacular. The waste is staggering. Economists have a term for this: malinvestment. Resources poured into projects that don't generate returns, bridges to nowhere, quite literally. And now China is stuck with a choice. They can let the real estate market collapse, wiping out the wealth of hundreds of millions of families. Or they can prop it up, pouring more money into a system that's already over-leveraged, delaying the inevitable and making it worse. Neither option is good. But here's what makes this story bigger than just China. For decades, the world looked at China and saw a miracle, a model, proof that a country could engineer prosperity through sheer force of will and central planning. Autocracy with results. Developing nations studied the Chinese playbook, build infrastructure, control capital, prioritize growth over everything else. But the thing about growing at 9% for 40 years is that it's not sustainable. You can't double every 8 years forever. Eventually, you run out of easy wins. The factories are built, the cities are connected, the population ages, and then what? China is facing that question right now. Youth unemployment is over 20%. The population is shrinking, local governments are buried in debt. The real estate market, the engine of wealth creation for an entire generation, is broken. The miracle is over. What comes next is the hard part. So here's the uncomfortable truth they don't put in the textbooks. China didn't just build wealth at unbelievable speed. It built a system that required unbelievable speed to survive. A system where stopping meant collapsing. And now the speed is slowing. The world is watching to see if China can transition from miracle to maturity, if it can. Shift from building cities to building technology, from exporting goods to consuming them, from growing at 9% to growing at 3%. Or if the very mechanism that created the fastest wealth accumulation in history becomes the mechanism that destroys it. One generation built it all, the next generation gets to find out if it lasts.